TOTALWELNSE, TotalWellness.com. And they can reach me direct at 732-796-8414.
Oh, say that number one more time.
732-796-8414 is my direct mobile number. And the service number is 888-420-4751.
Okay, sounds good. You might be hearing from me later on today.
Cool. Have a great day, man.
All right, peace.
For listening.
Thanks a lot, Lou.
Thanks, bye.
Anybody here write that number down? I didn't write it down myself.
No, don't worry. We're going to listen to this. We're going to listen to it.
Yeah. And
We're smarter than that.
thank you, Lou, for calling in. We're now going to go take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to have more cannabis news. We're going to be talking to Jack Cole, a former law enforcement official and co-founder of LEAP, who has been speaking out against prohibition for several decades now. And you're now listening to Fully Baked Radio on HamiltonRadio.net, Channel 2. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Are you feeling sluggish by lunch, or is lunch you had making you feel sluggish? Do you play sports?
Fully Baked Radio. We are back from break.
If you're just tuning in, we've been speaking with people from the cannabis movement. We just spoke with Solomon Siegel of Occupy Weed Street, and who was the other guy? Dana
Beal.
Dana Beal.
Yes, the founder of the Global Marijuana March in New York City Cannabis Parade. And they were talking to us live in New York City, where they were protesting and demonstrating in Manhattan and smoking weed outside, and telling us about their weekly pot demonstrations that they've been having at Union Square Park and other sites around Manhattan. But we have another guest that's joining us.
Yes. We have Jack Cole. Jack Cole is the co-founder of LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Prior to that, he was an ex-New Jersey State Trooper in the Undercover Narcotics Agents Force.
Oh, I didn't know he was from Jersey.
Yeah, he's a Jersey boy. Yeah.
Nice.
Very, very cool man, you know.
And we have a couple other guests. We have Kyle Moore, who is an activist from New Jersey and part of the East Coast Cannabis Coalition. He'll be joining us later, as well as Savannah Sprocket, who is from Mad Hatter Glass. So we have a nice little lineup today. If you're tuning in, we'll be on till 3 p.m. Eastern Time, broadcasting for another hour and 10 minutes or so, giving you cannabis news and updates and
the best cannabis news, the highest.
Speaking of news, I have a couple of news stories that occurred since we last were on the air. I think the biggest news story is that the head of the DEA resigned in scandal. Yes. As you should.
Yay.
You're an embarrassment to us all. And do you guys know why she resigned?
It was sex parties, wasn't it?
Paid for by the drug cartels, though.
Yeah, Ed, tell our listeners the scoop.
Apparently, some DEA agents down in South America, I believe they were.
Yes.
Were they in Colombia?
Yes.
Yes, and they were invited to sex parties that were being paid for by the drug cartels.
Baby.
I mean, come on, that's.
They were hiring prostitutes, exploiting women, screwing them on the government and the cartel's dime.
I know what happened.
And this chick looked the other way. So, she had to go.
She claimed that she couldn't fire them because of tenure and different but you know what?
Tenure, yes.
I don't remember her going on public record decrying these acts and saying that they should be stopped.
She didn't. But the crazy thing is, the DEA agents, especially high-level ones, at some point they have classifications, like they have security clearances and things like that. So maybe you can't fire them directly, but you can definitely. She could have taken their security clearance. I mean, technically they're dealing with the enemy, So she could have taken their security clearance, and that would have been made them ineligible to actually work in their job. So it's like firing them.
Well, she testified at a House Oversight Committee last week, and that's where the bulk of her criticism was drawn. And that's where she said that she was woefully unable to change the agency's culture. And, you know, I think to most people that was a big cop-out and saying that, like, yeah, people did these horrible things, and there's just nothing I could do about it because that's the way that it is. And so she resigned. She should have gotten booted. But, you know, glad to see her go. She, of course, is head of the agency that destroys thousands of people's lives every year by raiding them and stealing their products and their money. And, you know, basically in cahoots. More evidence the DEA is in cahoots with the drug cartels. Wake up, people.
One was funny. I was actually, when I was in Denver, I ran into the Royal Freeway Rick Ross, who was probably one of the first people that spoke out on the DEA and cartels overseas working together, bringing in drugs, laundering money, and sex parties and things like that. So,
Rick Ross, the rapper?
Yeah.
No.
Like Ricky Rose?
No, the real Rick Ross, the one that was locked up
the OG.
for traveling drugs
not
back
the
and
CO.
forth. No, not the cop.
Okay.
Not
I was going to say,
not
of
the-
course,
No,
Yeah,
that Rick
no.
Ross, he's
The
stole
real one.
I
Yeah,
had to make
exactly.
sure.
Yeah, nah.
I got a video of me and him too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta put
I
that online
I'll
one day.
post one as well. But yeah, it's
So a
just
lot of
ridiculous.
folks, too, just on this, to stay on the DEA tip, the DEA is the agency that classifies and continues to classify incorrectly marijuana as a Schedule I drug.
Cannabis.
Yes, cannabis as a Schedule I
Shame
drug.
on you.
And I know it happens, but you know, and of course, there's been all kinds of calls to get it descheduled or rescheduled, and you know, she has remained unapologetic and relentless.
She was the one that last year when they were having the hearings, where when they were trying to get her to say or get the DEA to say that marijuana is not in the same threat level as cocaine and heroin, she refused to say it. Remember, she went all around, you know, like, no, all drugs.
Drugs are bad.
I watched that hearing on C-SPAN like late at night one night.
Yeah.
And I caught that part. And she wasn't the only staffer that did that. That none of them wanted to really admit it.
That's the entire upper level of the DEA. They're holding that line. Otherwise, once they go, the entire war on drugs goes as far as marijuana goes. And that's what they're trying to protect that. You have to remember, a huge percentage of the war on drugs funding comes from marijuana. Once that's gone, that's the backbone of the war on drugs. If you remove marijuana from the war on drugs, the rest of the body of the war falls. You know, and I mean, the DEA is this huge agency who operates all around the country. Sure, they don't go around busting everybody with a couple dime bags. Not the DEA, you know. They bust the hundreds of pounds loads. They get the conspiracy cases
big
against.
boys.
Yeah. Well, really they don't just get the big boys, because once you're involved in a conspiracy, you're a hit too. You know, but you know that's you know, when they start confiscating money and seizing funds and all that. If you took marijuana out of that picture, you know, they'd have funding issues. They'd have staffing issues. They'd have so the upper management knows not to cross that line yet.
So I think we had somebody who can maybe comment on some of these discussions that we're having about
Maybe
law
ex-state
enforcement.
trooper.
maybe a state trooper could shed some light.
Hey, Jack, are you there?
Yes, I am.
How's it going? Welcome to Fully Baked Radio. It's a pleasure having you on.
Jack Cole is the co-founder of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, a nonprofit advocacy organization that works to change cannabis policy both at the local and federal level. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Nice. Can you give our audience members a little spiel about yourself and what it is that Law Enforcement Against Prohibition have been doing?
Sure. The way we got started was I spent 26 years in the New Jersey State Police, and 14 of those years I was undercover in narcotics. When I retired, I felt very bad about my role in implementing what I now feel is not just a failed war, it's far worse than that. It's a self-perpetuating, constantly expanding policy disaster. Every year it gets worse than it was the year before. and we've been making it worse now for 46 years that the war has continued. So I sat down with 4 other police officers when I retired, and we created this organization, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is known by its acronym LEAP, L-E-A-P. And what we want to do is we want to end drug prohibition around the world today, just like we ended alcohol prohibition in this country in 1933. Because looking at this from the viewpoint of law enforcement, we understand that the day after we ended that terrible law, alcohol prohibition, the next morning, Al Capone and all these smuggling buddies were out of business. They were off our streets. They were no longer out there killing each other to control that very lucrative market, or killing our kids caught in crossfire, drive-by shootings, all the things we experience today. They were no longer killing us cops charged with fighting that useless war. So we know that if we were to legalize all these drugs, we could take them out of the hands of the criminals, and we could end this terrible violence. And then once we've done that, and only once we've legalized, we can actually regulate and control the drugs. And once we regulate the drugs, we can do other wonderful things. We can end overdose deaths. Nobody has to die of an overdose of drugs. They don't die because they shoot more and more dope. They die because they simply don't know how much that tiny little package of powder they're buying is really the drug and how much the cutting agent. If they knew, we could keep them alive, and if we keep them alive, we've got a chance to wean them off these hard drugs. We could prevent half of all potential cases of these terrible bloodborne diseases like AIDS and hepatitis from ever occurring, because according to our Centers for Disease Control, 50% of all new cases of AIDS and hepatitis can be traced directly back to intravenous drug users sharing needles.
Now, Jack. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Now, there's some people that may agree with, well, actually, there's a lot of people that agree with cannabis being legalized, whether medicinal or social usage. But there's like a couple people where, they're a little iffy when you start saying legalize heroin and cocaine and things like that. That LEAP is fighting for. To those people, can you break down why heroin and like cocaine and those things should be legalized as much as marijuana should be?
The reason we say all drugs is the more dangerous the drug is, the more reason it needs to be legalized. Because you can't control or regulate anything while it's illegal. The control and regulation of the illicit drugs is in the hands of the criminals, and they haven't done too good a job for us. They tell us what drugs are going to be supplied to our community, how potent those drugs are going to be, what they're going to be cut with, how much they're going to cost, where they're going to be sold, what age group they're going to sell to, when they decide that they're going to sell heroin to 10-year-old kids on our playgrounds. That's what happens. So we say, let us take control of this market again and stop all this. Let us set conditions of where it can be sold, who it can be sold to, keep it out of the hands of our children who, by the way, for the last 30 years in high school have told us that it's easier to buy illegal drugs than it is to buy beer and cigarettes. And Phil, I'm sure you guys know the reason for that. It's they get carded if they go into a place that sells these legal drugs like alcohol and tobacco. Mm-hmm. Somebody says, "Hey, you're old enough to buy this dope," and the drug dealer on the street corner is not going to say that. Once we legalize the drugs, everything gets better. We can reduce death, disease, crime, and addiction by legalization and regulation.
Yeah, I think there's another side to that argument, which is that in some other countries, they've taken the approach that addiction is actually a public health issue and not a criminal one, and that they rather have people using drugs in the care of doctors and physicians who can, supervise them and make sure they're okay and give them the proper treatment that's needed in order to end their addiction. Does LEAP take a similar viewpoint as far as their attitudes on addictions here in this country?
Yes, absolutely we do. We want to end the war on drugs, treat drug abuse as a health problem, not a crime problem. That way you can